Today we are going to study about colloids. We studied that the colloidal solutions are heterogeneous mixtures. The solutions can be classified into three types. The solution that is homogeneous nature, we call them as true solution or solution. And heterogeneous solutions are suspensions and colloids. So there are two types of heterogeneous solution, suspension and colloids. We studied about suspension in the last class. Today we are going to study about colloids, the second type of heterogeneous solution, colloids. Earlier we studied what is a suspension. So suspensions and colloids are not solutions. That means they are not true solution. They are heterogeneous solution in which the particles are not uniformly distributed. So we define suspension as it is a heterogeneous mixture in which the particles are so large that they settle at the solvent if not constantly stirred. Or we can define it as suspensions is a heterogeneous mixture in which the small particles of a solid are spread throughout a liquid without dissolving it. So, the heterogeneous mixture in which the particle size is larger, about 100 nanometer, larger than 100 nanometer, we call them as a suspension. The size of the solute particle is quite large, larger than 100 nanometer. And the particles in a suspension can be seen with our naked eyes. And the particles do not cannot be passed through a filter paper. That means a suspension can be separated by filtration, and if you kept for some time it will settle down the particles, so suspensions are unstable. And if we pass a beam of light, the suspension scatters the beam of light since the particle size is very large. So that's are the properties of suspension we studied. So let us look how it differ from colloids. So what is a colloid? We can define colloids as it's a heterogeneous mixture in which the size of the particles lies between the true solution and a suspension. So colloids can be defined as a colloid is a kind of solution. Which kind of solution? It is a heterogeneous mixture and it is intermediate between true solution and suspension. Look at the particle size of colloids. We know that true solution is less than 1 nanometer. The size of the particle is less than 1 nanometer. What about suspension? The particle size is larger than 100 nanometer. The intermediate of these particles is colloids. That means the size is between 1 nanometer and 100 nanometer, in between these particles. That's why we define colloids as intermediate between those of true solution and suspension. Colloids is a kind of solution in which the size of the solute particles is intermediate between true solution and those in suspension. The size of solute particles in a colloid is bigger than the true solution but smaller than those of suspension. Is it clear? Bigger than the true solution and smaller than the suspension. That's why we call them as it is an intermediate of true solution and suspension. So how can we define colloids? Colloid solution is a heterogeneous mixture in which the size of particles lies between true solution and suspension. Or you can define in another way that a colloid is a kind of solution in which the size of solute particles is intermediate between those in true solution and those in suspension. So what it means, the solute particles in a colloid is bigger than that of a true solution but smaller than that of a suspension. So some examples are soap solution, star solution, blood, milk, ink, etc. Now you have a doubt whether these colloids are homogeneous or not. Though colloids appear to be homogeneous, but actually they are found to be heterogeneous. When we observe this solution, it's a milk, example of a colloids. So when we observe this, we can't find any particles in that solution. So heterogeneous means what? It is unevenly distributed. So uneven distribution, not uniformly distributed, but we cannot observe the uneven distribution in a colloids. But actually it is a heterogeneous mixture but appear to be a homogeneous mixture. That is the difference. In a suspension, through our naked eyes itself, we can observe the particles settling down or particles distribution. But in a colloids, the particles are not seen with our naked eyes, but actually it is a heterogeneous mixture. It is evenly distributed, but it is appear to be a homogeneous mixture. So a colloid is not a true solution or not a homogeneous solution. It appears to be homogeneous, but it is actually a heterogeneous mixture. Okay, so the particle size is in between suspension and true solution. That's why we cannot able to see the particles inside a colloids. But in a suspension, the particle size is large enough to see. In a true solution, since it is very, very small and uniformly distributed, we cannot observe through our eyes. In a colloidal solution, since the particles are intermediate, the size cannot be seen with our naked eye, but it is actually a heterogeneous mixture.